My name is Ryan Hansen. I'm the president of Bon Voyage Travel, and we're excited to be back again for our Bon Voyage Travel weekly webinar series where we're bringing destinations, supplier partners, different ways of travel right into your living room. And you're coming from my dining room, as a matter of fact. And like you, we're trying to be great civic citizens and community members here. And so while our offices are physically closed, we're still working. We're ready to help plan your next vacation. And I actually hope that you will consider a river cruise, which is probably why you're here today, to learn about all things river cruise. And we're going to just go ahead and get started. I happen to be the presenter today, so I won't even need to introduce myself and waste time with that. But I'm excited about this topic because I have traveled on many river cruises myself. And what I have learned is that there are so many subtle differences between the different supplier partners that sail, the different rivers that you sail on, the time of year that you travel, who you travel with, that I wanted to provide an unedited, unbiased, unfiltered view of river cruising to people like you, our clients, so that you would understand and know more about what you want and that we can craft your vacation in a much more meaningful way. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, this is all things river cruise, and we're going to dive into a lot of different topics. In fact, I will be presenting the top 5 list of many different things, and we'll get to that here in a minute. So you may want to take notes. It might be kind of fast for you. And what I'm going to do today is to share with you all of the facts about the cruise lines and let you pick what's right for you. And one household might say, ooh, I love that river. Let's go on the Rhine. Somebody else may say, oh, we've already done the Rhine. I think the Danube is for us. So I'm not going to tell you what the best river cruise is or who has the best food, who has the best experience, because you know what? There's magazines and there's travel industry leaders out there like Condé Nast, Travel and Leisure, Cruise Critic. They all have their top lists. They present one cruise line with the best cuisine on the rivers. This cruise line is the best river cruise experience. And while those accolades are all well-deserved, that may not be for you. It might be something different that you're looking for. So in addition to the presentation today, I want you to look into the chat feature that is beneath your Zoom screen right now. And you can engage with us. We're monitoring the chat feature. You could also put some questions that you may have for me during the presentation, and I will get to those questions at the end of our time here today, and we'll answer every question that you put in there. But I wanted to put this link in the chat feature to a document that you can print at home. Open it up and print this at home. And this is a simple river cruise comparison that I'll be referencing a little bit throughout the presentation that really looks at the different supplier partners, as we call them. AMA Waterways, Crystal, Tauck, Uniworld, and Viking are going to be the cruise lines that I talk about the most. And I would say because I've sailed on all 5 of those products. We also sell Scenic and we sell American Cruise Line, amongst others. But I have not taken a lot of time today to speak to those lines. Those are great cruise lines that you will want to talk to your travel advisor about a little bit more. So this document, you can click on that link in the chat feature, but we're also going to be emailing it to you as a participant in our webinar on Friday. We'll follow up with you. There will be a PDF in your email. So if that's easier for you to just print that off at home or review it from your inbox, please know that that will be coming on Friday. But this has a lot of great information to talk about. And that is the start of our conversation, the river difference. This is my wife and I, and we're on a river cruise here in Hungary. And we have experienced, like I said, multiple different rivers and multiple different products. But what I can tell you are there really stand out 5 differences between river and ocean cruising, river and land tours. Let's break it down for you in this fashion. You're talking about hundreds of people versus thousands of people. On a river cruise, you're going to be anywhere from 100 passengers up to 200 passengers. But on an ocean cruise, really a small ship experience is going to be north of 200 passengers just to start. And you could get all the way up to 6,000 people on your ship. You can obviously think through that. Economies of scale, the size of things on a river cruise ship are this size. The size of things on a 6,000 passenger ship can be this big, right? The pools, the public spaces, the theaters, all of the options for you are going to be different on an ocean cruise versus a river cruise. So start getting your mindset in that frame of reference. Bigger's not always better. I'll leave you with that. And also, smaller does have its advantages. And one other advantage is there's great cities and small towns that you can access with a river cruise. No surprise here. You cannot take an ocean cruise and dock in Vienna. That's just not possible. Only a river cruise affords you the ability to have a cruising experience and step off the ship right into the heart of the town in Vienna or many other little wonderful stops. Even some of the best cities in the world that an ocean cruise would tell you is a port of call. Those ocean cruise experienced viewers can tell you that when you dock in Athens, you're in the port of Piraeus. You don't step off of the ship and you're literally at the foot of the Acropolis. You're 45 minutes of a bus ride away, or even further if you dock in Civitavecchia, if I said that correctly, for your stop in Rome, you're an hour and a half away at least, or further from Berlin if that is your stop. So this really does afford you to be much closer to the activity when you step off of a river ship. As we continue on with the highlights and the differences, the focus of a river cruise is the destination. So start thinking with me, your ocean cruise experience. You may love the workout facility, the spa, the theater. You love the big production shows of a Norwegian cruise line. You love having 4 different pools to choose from and slides and water activities. Not on a river vessel. The focus is not the ship. The focus is the destination. So it's really the necessities on board and a few niceties that you'll have, but you're really going to be off ship more than you are on ship. And like I mentioned earlier, you will be docking in the heart of many of the towns and villages that you're stopping in. There may be a few that the dock and the port access is not perfectly situated to the old town of Budapest, which it actually is in Budapest, but maybe somewhere else. It's not exactly right steps away, but it would be a short bus ride. I don't want to fool you. There are some bus trips that happen with a river vessel, but not nearly as many as you would have on an ocean cruise. And last but not least, treat it as a floating hotel. Still the wonderful parts of cruising. Unpack once, experience lots of different places and destinations. That is the same thing that can happen on a river cruise, but treat it as a floating hotel, not a floating city. As we continue on with our discussion topics, what happens on board? Maybe more specifically, what are those differences that I kind of touched on at a high level? Onboard life, the top 5 things that you need to look forward to. Number of guests. All right, so we talked about this specifically. 106 guests per up to 190 guests. And it's not a large number of people that are included. It is a smaller number, and that helps because you have a little bit more service. There's more people to help you. There's more people there to serve you, to wait on you. And you're just getting on and off ship is a lot easier when you have a small number of people. When it's time to disembark and get to your transfer, it is super easy when there's only 140 people on the ship for you to disembark versus 6,000 that might be on one of those Royal Caribbean Oasis of the Seas ships, which has all the wonderful things to it, but just a slightly different experience. If that is not for you and you like the smaller environment, river cruising is definitely for you. As you continue on thinking about onboard life, I touched on passenger to crew ratio. And in my spreadsheet, that little comparison chart that either you were able to click on the link or it will be emailed to you. I promise you that. So if you can't reach it today, it will be emailed on Friday. I want you to look at passenger to crew ratio. You want the lowest number possible. And sometimes in the cruise industry, people throw out big numbers that may not mean a lot to you. The gross tonnage of an ocean vessel is 25,000 tons. Well, what does that mean to a layperson? In this scenario, passenger to crew ratio, you want the lowest number possible. So let's just say the number says 3 passengers to every 1 crew. What that means to you is for every 3 people on board, there's 1 person to serve you There's one person serving 3. There's one person helping 3. There's one person there in the case of an emergency for every 3 people. So if I'm you, don't you want more people to help you? I would want a number closer to 2.5 to 1, because that means when I really want something in my stateroom, somebody's available to help me. That means if I want some help at the restaurant and the wait staff, there's more wait staff there to help. And in case of an emergency, don't we all? We all want the most help possible. So keep thinking about that, because some cruise lines, as we talk about them more in depth, they have staff and crew that have multiple jobs. You may have the person that grabbed your bag at the port and loaded into your room might also be your waiter that night, because they maximize the usage and the time of their staff. But on some cruise lines, your butler in your stateroom is your butler 24/7. And trust me, there are butlers on some of these cruise lines, and we'll talk more in depth about those. Food, think about food. Now, again, economy's a scale. So on some ships, Norwegian, let's say, on the Epic or the Escape, you have 21 different restaurant options for you. How amazing is that? If you're going to be on a long, long voyage, variety is the spice of life, and that really comes from the cuisine side of things. Think of the river vessels. Some may only have 2 options for your restaurants just because of size and capacity issues. Others may get up all the way to 6, depending upon the level of service that they may have. So take a good look at that on the comparison sheet and understand what those differences are. Some cruise lines, and we'll help you with this at the advisor level, because of the way they prepare their food, it's called banquet style. So they prepare a bunch of Cornish hens, they prepare a bunch of vegetables, and they prepare a bunch of potatoes. And when it's time for Mr. Smith to get his plate, he orders the chicken with a side of vegetables and mashed potatoes. The banquet style happens. On a cruise line like Crystal, they prepare all of their food a la minute. And what does a la minute mean? That means made to order at the minute. So instead of Mr. Smith getting the buffet line of Cornish game hen and vegetables and mashed potatoes, he gets to say, I want my steak medium, and I want my baked potato twice baked. And they can go into the kitchen and they will prepare it a la minute. And you think about that, just the quality of the delivery of the service of the food. It's going to taste better if it is made to order. So think about that as you're planning your trip. And as you talk to our advisors, ask them, is this a cruise line that prepares their food a la minute, or is it banquet style? And our staff can help you with that. The next thing of onboard life are the amenity options. And on a ship like this, again, a river vessel, amenities are not the same in volume as an ocean cruise line. So think of your fitness center. If there is a fitness center, and you can look at that comparison sheet, and it will show you who has a fitness center, who has a spa, who might have bicycles available on board. You need to think about that. If you love riding bicycles through the countryside of Germany when you're stopping on your river cruise, I think you would love to travel with a Crystal or an Ama, because they have bicycles on board ready for you. Now, if that's not as important to you and you say, not riding a bike, I'm on a river cruise, why would I do that? Viking does not travel with bicycles. They use their space differently. They have access to bicycles at certain ports of call that they can help arrange for you, but it's not as easy as you would on a Crystal or an Ama, just like I did in the previous picture, and just say, I'd like to go on a bike ride today. And you just take the bike and off you go. So think of those things and what matters to you, but understand on a river vessel, the spa's a little smaller, the fitness center's a little smaller or non-existent in some cases as well. As we continue on our chat here below, let's look at shore excursions. Not all river vessels have shore excursions that are the same. So think about what's important to you. Some shore excursions are more like city highlight tours. And these are great. They're more like drive-bys. So you get in the bus and they take you on a tour of the city, or it's a walking tour and you just kind of walk through the old town and see the highlights. Others, like a Tauk River cruise, are much more educational, and they get you behind the scenes access to a museum or a castle, and they have a guide talk to you more like a docent would inside of a museum about all of the history of this vessel. It's not just someone from the ship saying, there's the church, there's the steeple, there's the people, if you get my drift. So take a look closely at these shore excursions and understand some cruise lines have all shore excursions included with your cost of your cruise fare. Other cruise lines have some shore excursions included and others that you pay a little bit more for. So we all want you to understand what is ahead of you as you make your decision from a river cruise. That comparison sheet can help, but we're also going to talk about these cruise lines a little bit more in depth as we move along. Now let's shift gears. We've given you the experience. You kind of have a feel now for the river itself. Which river do I go on? Where are these ships sailing? 85% of all river cruises that North Americans would typically sail on are in Europe. And so we'll focus a lot of our time on the European rivers because that's by and large the majority of the rivers that we travel on. But there's a few others, and I'll talk about those. If you've done a couple of the European rivers and you're looking for a different experience, I'm happy to share with you, and we will talk about that today. Somebody did ask in the chat, so I'll address it now when we talk about rivers. River cruising is really not operating right now. My prediction, and I'm really bad at predictions when it comes to this pandemic, but I will say that we're going to anticipate river cruising coming back next year. I just don't see too many operators being able to even take a Christmas market cruise, and we'll talk about those. There are river cruise lines that sail in November and December that hit the Christmas markets, but I would just be surprised if those would be readily available the way that this pandemic has impacted us. But we'll talk about the river in regards to what is a better reason to travel by way of river cruise due to a pandemic. And we'll talk about those medical things as we get a little bit further into the presentation. So top 5 rivers that we think you should travel on. And this is my opinion. You may have a different opinion, but if I had never been on a river cruise, I would travel on the Rhine. And the Rhine would be my first stop. And the Rhine typically has river cruises that sail in and out of Amsterdam and travel all the way down the Rhine River. So if you're looking at your map here, Amsterdam's in the upper left-hand corner in the Netherlands. And both ways are traversed on the river. And so 7-night cruise from Amsterdam to Basel, which you don't see here, but Basel's a little bit west of Miltenberg from where you see Koblenz in that area. And so you can travel southbound, you can travel northbound on the Rhine. This is really more of your traditional German countryside river cruise. These are the sights that you will see. Big castles, rolling hills, just a quintessential river cruise experience. But also in the Rhine are the waterways that come off of the Rhine in the Dutch area of the Netherlands and Holland. And what I love about this river cruise experience is tulip time. You're going to want to travel in the month of April if you love flower colors and smells, the sights of the beautiful different shades of reds and yellows and pinks and purples. The Dutch waterways off of the Rhine is the type of cruise you want to take during April for tulip time. So that might be something, if you've been on a different river, this is a much different experience with the windmills in the background of your vista, just framing this beautiful picture. You too can have this picture on your iPhone or your camera. Let's continue on. And one of the differences here in these rivers, again, you see the Rhine in the upper left, the furthest west and north river of this picture here. As you travel down the Rhine from Amsterdam all the way to the Main-Danube Canal, then you get down into Nuremberg, and really many cruises depart on the Danube from Passau. Many depart from Vienna. All the way down to Bucharest. So the Danube, very long. So you can do a couple different things. We'll talk specifically about the Danube here in a second, but you can also go on a grand European voyage, a 14 or 17 night stop itinerary that would go from Amsterdam all the way to Bucharest. So you could experience the entirety of this map on the rivers. And this is the type of experience that you can expect on the Danube River. And it definitely is the romantic Danube, the blue Danube, the waltz. I mean, you will be stopping in opportunities to stop in Vienna and see the beautiful museums. In Vienna, you'll be in Budapest here, where you have the town of Buda on your left, Pest on your right. And so the sights and sounds of Budapest are wonderful. You can take an excursion to Salzburg. And as those of you that know the sound of music very well, one of your day excursions could be to walk in the shoes of Julie Andrews and the hills of Salzburg, Austria. This is the river you would want to be on for that type of an experience. And I want to show you another picture here that somewhat illustrates the docking in the heart concept that I gave you earlier. If you look at the far right, and actually right down above the tree line, there's a bridge there. That's the Chain Bridge in Budapest. And many river vessels dock at the Chain Bridge. And the building on the far right that's lit up that you can see there, that is Parliament in Budapest. That's the Hungarian Parliament building, one of the most famous and iconic buildings in all of that country. You are steps away from Parliament when you dock on a river cruise. That bridge right behind me is the Chain Bridge. So if I go back to the picture before, you can see right where we were. Off to the far right, we were steps away from the Parliament building and were able to walk straight down there, had a wonderful tour of Parliament. And as you saw it there lit up at night, what happens on many river cruises is during dinner, you will be docked, but then during dinner, your river captain will sail down the Danube past the Parliament building, turn around and come back the other way to dock back by the Chain Bridge so that everyone, regardless of which side of the boat you're on at the restaurant, gets that sweeping view of the Parliament building lit up. And it is magnificent, a sight that you will definitely want to see while you're on the Danube. Let's continue on. And the next river, again, one man's opinion here that I would travel on is let's go to France. And there is a great river cruise that departs out of Paris and you travel along the Seine to Normandy. And I, as all of you are probably United States citizens, and I would encourage everyone, if you've never done it, you need to get to Normandy. And a great way to do that is by way of a river cruise. Now, candidly speaking, just so that we're speaking transparently here, the river cruise, the Seine, does not stop right at Omaha Beach. You don't step off the boat and there you are at Pointe du Hoc at the Normandy beachhead. It is a bus ride, but each of the river vessels will have a great guide, someone who lives in the area, knows the history that you will want to hear about, the World War II history, and the significance not only to the world, but the significance to the French that live in that area of what happened on that fateful day of June 6, 1944. I would strongly encourage you to do that. The wonderful stop there at the American Cemetery, the United States Cemetery. There's some wonderful things to see from more of a museum standpoint, but just to understand what our soldiers faced during that assault on the European mainland is just fascinating. But this cruise also takes you to some unbelievable places. You see Leon Delis there right in the middle. And I talked about quaint towns. And these are some of the wonderful experiences that I think about. When we were on this cruise with my family, we traveled to Leon Delis. And when we stepped off the boat at Leon Delis, at the top of the hill was an old castle, a rundown stone castle that was called Chateau Galliard. For those of you that are history buffs, you may recall what Chateau Galliard represents. It's Richard the Lionheart's castle. He fought at this castle. He defended this castle from atop the hill, right? The vantage point in Leon Delis where he could see the entire valley. What an amazing historical reference point for my children who were on the trip with me to understand those battles that the French and the English fought way back when, 1,000 years ago, when these battles took place. Richard the Lionheart stood in this castle. That's the type of experience that a cruise on the Seine will provide. But you also get things like this. Most cruise lines have a couple overnights on land that start or end in Paris. And who wouldn't take 2 extra nights in Paris and then board your river vessel and go on the cruise on the Seine River? It doesn't get much better than this from an experience, but much different. As you can imagine, the French countryside is much different than the German countryside or even Austria and Hungary. So just understand what you're getting into and what is piquing your interest. Next river, we've touched on the Rhine, the Danube, we've touched on the Seine. Let's stay in France, and we're going to go south, the southern part of France, and that's the Rhone. You can go into Paris, have a couple nights stay, take the train to Lyon, and board your river vessel as you depart for the southern tip of France, and you can see places like Provence and Avignon, and this is a completely different experience than what you would have even on the Seine on the northern part of France. And these areas are just fantastic. I have had the pleasure of sailing on this river and of stepping off in a little town called Aix-en-Provence. And many of you may have been to Aix-en-Provence. And one of my favorite things to do on a river cruise is to step off the ship in the morning, close my eyes, and follow my nose. And why would I follow my nose? You know this, there's a patisserie, there's a bakery that is nearby. I promise you, they do this on purpose, that is baking fresh breads and scones and other just wonderful smelling and tasting desserts that you can just follow your nose, you grab a couple euros, and you can just walk the town with that fresh bread in your hand. And that is a treat and a delight that I would encourage you to do. So follow your nose, especially on the Rhone. One of my favorite patisseries is in Aix-en-Provence. And we'll continue on. We've hit our top 4. The last river in this top 5 list is the Douro. And not one that has been as popular in the last 10 to 15 years, but it's gaining a lot of popularity. A lot of cruise lines are starting to put better ships on this river in transparency. Many cruise lines chartered vessels. They didn't actually own and operate the ships that they would put on the Douro, but they are now. And there are river cruise companies like Ama Waterways I would encourage you to look at. I would look at Uniworld as a river cruise that you would want to take a river cruise on the Douro. Here we would recommend that you would go to Lisbon for a couple of days and then make your way up to the town of Porto. And you're going to see a slightly different landscape, right, as you would see in Germany. So much more colorful. The Portuguese and Spanish influence on food and culture and architectural design, you will see a dramatic difference. But you'll also have a wonderful experience of traveling through the port wine regions. And what a different experience that is versus the vineyards in Germany, which, by the way, there are wonderful wine vineyards that you can take excursions in Germany. I've taken one in Austria, in Melk. What a fantastic experience there. There's lots of vineyards, but this is a different one because of the port wine that you can experience with a Portuguese river cruise on the Douro. I would encourage you to think about that. If you've said, I've done the Rhine, I've done the Danube, I've done France, but I don't know if I want to do a river cruise, I would consider sailing on the Douro. Well, we've hit those 85% of all the riverbeds that are in Europe. Let's talk about some different ways to see them again, or maybe some different rivers to experience. And I bucketed these as the top 5 themed river cruises that you may want to consider as you start to make your decision of which river cruise works for you. And I'll start with the Christmas markets. I mentioned it earlier. This is one I've said I've traveled all the rivers. I've been on a lot of different ships. I've not been to a Christmas market, and there can be nothing like it. I'd like to tell you that I've experienced stepping off the ship in Vienna at this Christmas market here and have walked the little shops and have just taken in all of the lights and the sounds and the tastes of a hot apple cider or a hot toddy if you're thinking that way is better for you. I really am excited about my next opportunity. Will probably be on a Christmas market cruise. Plus the timing obviously is different. There's about a 6-week window of Christmas market cruises from the middle of November into the 1st of November into December. And just in full transparency, Not sure if those river cruises are going to operate. I still think some of our cruise partners have them as the ability to book still right now. But I would be a little cautious if I were you of booking a Christmas market cruise right now. I'd have much more confidence in doing something in 2021 that has the best chance of sailing. As we continue on with our themed river cruises, I mentioned wine cruises. I mean, come on. Get 2 or 3 of your best friends, your couple partners that you go out to dinner with or you go to happy hour with. Instead of just doing it one night at a local restaurant, go on a river cruise. Experience this together. There's something special about traveling in a group and having a shared experience with a glass of wine in hand. And the wine is obviously fresh from the area that you're traveling in, the vineyard that maybe you went on your shore excursion to. You can bring back a bottle with you on ship. Many times the river cruises in those stops already have house wine available for you, and it's the house wine from the region you're traveling in. They do that typically with the food and the beverage on any of these cruise lines to theme that. Again, if you're in Porto traveling on the Douro, you're going to have port wine as your primary wine, not the only, and you're going to have a Spanish and a Portuguese influence on the cuisine versus having brats and Wiener Schnitzel on your cruise in Austria. So you have some different experiences, but don't lose sight of the fact of traveling as a group with some friends because you all love to grab a glass of wine and share that experience together. Outside of Europe, there's exotic rivers of the world that maybe you would consider traveling on. The picture on your left is a typical experience from sailing on the Mekong. And one of our great partners, I've mentioned them earlier, AMA Waterways, has a wonderful ship on the Mekong River. This gives you that Vietnamese, Cambodian feel. The feel on ship is culturally connected and aligned with the region. The shore excursions that you can take, you can hit Angkor Wat and some of the other wonderful temples in the area in the region. Just bear in mind where you're at. It's not Europe. And don't think, oh, it's a river cruise, so it's going to be exactly like my river cruise on the Rhine. Even on ship is going to be slightly different. The layout and design and decor of your suite or your stateroom is going to be perfectly fine to you, but it might be slightly different because of the region that you're located in. So I would definitely encourage you to consider, if you've never been to that region, I would definitely look at Vietnam as, oh, I've been on all those rivers in Europe. There's nothing left for me. I would definitely look at the Mekong as an option for you. And many of our partners, thank you, Peggy, as you mentioned, travel and have some great itineraries that do visit this region. So AMA is not your only option by any means. The picture on your right happens to be an AMA ship as well. This is the Zambezi Queen, and this is an African safari river cruise. So if you've said, oh, I've been to Cape Town and I've been to Johannesburg, I've done a safari in Kenya, but I haven't done a safari by way of river cruise, this could be a wonderful option for you. So think of the dynamic difference of a shore excursion on a river cruise on the Zambezi Queen versus on the Danube. And that would be a much different experience. But think about this as another option for you. Also, we don't have a picture of it, but there are river cruises out of Egypt now again. There was a little bit of a hiatus of river cruises in Egypt. My frame of reference that I would recommend there would be Tauk or Uniworld is probably your best option if you think, I'd love to go to Egypt, and a river cruise sounds like that's the way I would want to go. A little bit more escorted and a little bit different versus staying in a hotel. I would know what I would be getting into. That could be definitely an option in your future. As we continue on with the theme cruises and you say to yourself, Africa and Vietnam are just frankly too far away for me now or even in the future, there are close to home options. The picture on the top is American Queen Steamboat. That's a great company partner of ours. The picture on the bottom is American Cruise Line. Two separate companies, similar names, but you can obviously see the differences. The primary vessel of choice for American Cruise Line, that river cruise looks much like a European river cruise experience, and it is. These are very new build ships from American Cruise Line, and it's not just the rivers that you can cruise. There's also the waterways, and the Great Lakes could be an option for you, but you could travel the Mississippi and hit Memphis and New Orleans and go to the World War II Museum just outside of Vicksburg. Just some unbelievable experiences that are close to home. Maybe you don't want to fly on a plane and go across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe. You want to stay close to home, or because of the pandemic, you just don't want to go out of the country. Well, you want to go on the Snake River or the Columbia River in the Great Northwest. What a cool experience to travel this way domestically. And again, the food, the cuisine, the excursions, all localized to the region. But you can tell the paddle boat experience on the Mississippi with American Queen Steamboat, the ship on the top of your picture here, much different than the picture and the experience you would have with American Cruise Line. But we offer both of these. So if this starts to say, oh, that's more me and my wife would love that paddle boat experience, then talk to your travel advisor at Bon Voyage about American Queen. That is a fabulous experience. I think you would enjoy it if that tickles your fancy. I mentioned this earlier about my kids being able to travel with us, and that is a misnomer. I think it's a misperception in river cruising that a lot of people think river cruising is not for the young. And I would say contrary to that, I think the young can very much experience the rivers in a wonderful, engaging way. Again, we traveled on the Seine. I mentioned our experience of Les Andelys. If you recall the Chateau Galliard at the top of the hill in Les Andelys, our kids still talk about that climb up to the top of that castle. Our kids pictured here were 11 and 8, and we participated on a river cruise experience with Tauk, and it's called their Bridges program. And Tauk has a dedicated kids program and itinerary specifically crafted, all with kids ages 8 to 18 in mind. It is not your cruise. It's not your grandmother's cruise, but it could be your grandparents' cruise, because if they're experiencing it with their grandkids, I think they will love to see Europe through the eyes of your children. And on our cruise, we were what you might call a traditional trip, the parents and just the kids. But typically at night, seated next to us on our right was a grandmother and grandfather and their 2 grandsons. No parents. They just wanted to take their grandkids. On our left was a grandmother and her 16-year-old granddaughter who had never been to Europe, and she wanted to take her granddaughter to Europe for her first time on a river cruise. Tauk Bridges creates and crafts their programs for multi-generational family trips with the intention of engaging the kids to want more. So when we were in Paris, they took us on an excursion in the Louvre. And you and I both know that it would take you a week to get through a fraction of the works of art in the Louvre. As an adult, that would be boring for even me to do that 7 straight days. With our kids, we went on a scavenger hunt that lasted 2.5 hours. And the best words were uttered out of all of the kids' mouths when we left the Louvre. We want to go back, Dad. We want to go back, Grandma. That's the experience that this is about. It's to whet the appetite of these kids so that they want to return to some of these things. And if you say to yourself, oh, an 8-year-old, why in the world would you take them to a museum like the Louvre? Our family's experience, our philosophy is we want to expose our kids to these types of things early so that they develop an appreciation over time. They may not love it if you spend 7 days in the Louvre admiring every single work of art and sculpture that's in there, but definitely something to think about on your trip. Tauk Bridges would be the way to go with your multi-generational experience. Jumping ahead, top 5 FYIs, for your information type things that I think you should know. I've touched on a lot of these things already. Most of this presentation are FYIs, but here's one, and it is size does matter. So think of this, the length of these ships and the size of these ships, much smaller than ocean vessels, but at the same time, you need to recognize that you will see promotional and marketing material from cruise lines that maybe call their ships a long ship. Viking says, oh, we have long ships. Well, just because Uniworld and AMA Waterways don't have the name long ship, almost in all cases, they're the same length of ship. They're all 443 feet long, 38.5 feet wide. They're the same size, but Economies of scale, think about that. 38.5 feet wide is a lot thinner than an ocean vessel. So things are a little bit smaller. Keep that in mind, but don't be lured into the long ship concept. In most cases, those ships aren't any longer than any other cruise vessel. All-inclusive. This is a word in travel that's gained steam over the last few years, and especially the river cruise space. An all-inclusive river cruise, what does that mean? Well, some river cruise vessels would tell you we're all-inclusive as it pertains to maybe alcohol. We serve beer and wine at lunch and dinner complimentary. Well, is that truly all-inclusive? Well, if you're on Uniworld or Crystal, all-inclusive means at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if you want a glass of champagne, guess what, my friend? You get it, and it's free. If on Viking, after dinner, it's 9 o'clock at night, you'd like a little nightcap, you go to the bar, you'd like to top off with a brandy or a whiskey, guess what? You are paying for that brandy or whiskey because it's outside of meal service. So if that matters to you, if all-inclusive matters, from coffees, specialty coffees, to unlimited bottles of water, to alcohol, please look at our comparison sheet and understand the difference between what all-inclusive means. AMA Waterways tries to bridge the gap. They serve unlimited beer and wine at lunch and dinner, and they give you a happy hour as well. So for about an hour before every dinner, they will open up the bar to complimentary cocktails, beer and wine, and so you can have a happy hour experience that's included in your cruise fare. Just understand what that means. If it's after dinner and the restaurant's closed, you may need to be aware of that. And speaking of restaurants, something that I didn't mention, there is a difference on the river. Some vessels, not many, Uniworld, Crystal, and depending on the river, there's a few others, but not many of them have unlimited 24-hour room service. You may be like me. I get a hankering for some French fries at 11 o'clock at night when I'm on a cruise. It just happens. I don't have it at home. I only have this experience on a cruise. On the river cruise, beware. You may be on a river vessel. The kitchen could be closed. You may not be able to order whatever you want. You may only be able to get some fruit or something that's already prepared or a dry good. You won't be able to have anything made to order for you like you would with Uniworld and Crystal that does have the 24-hour room service. Also in all-inclusive concepts are excursion options. And that would be, you got to know the difference between excursions. I talked about this earlier, but please note some excursions, they say they're all-inclusive. We have a complimentary excursion in every port of call. Well, that's one way of saying it. Other cruise lines will say, we have one complimentary excursion every day. What you may not realize is on the river, these little towns are not very far apart. You may dock in one town in the morning, have an onshore experience in the morning, and then you go sailing for an hour to an hour and a half during lunch, and you arrive at another port. If you're on the cruise line that says one free excursion daily, you're going to be paying for one of those excursions versus an all-inclusive. So please take a look at the comparison sheet. Talk to your advisor about what matters to you. Again, some of these things may not matter as much to you. I just want to encourage you to know what's out there. I don't want to shy away from a tough topic, and this is one that's been a tough topic recently, and that is water levels. There are a lot of things you avoid from a negative standpoint by taking a river cruise versus an ocean cruise. Clearly, the seasickness is not the same. You don't have the swells and the waves that could toss you back and forth on the river. You will see the shoreline right off of your bow, off the stern, off of your balcony. Unlike on an ocean cruise, you may not see land for a couple of days if you have days at sea. So that's definitely a positive. But Mother Nature does get involved, and we can't stop what can happen from the water level. So beware of high levels and low levels on the rivers. And typically, high water occurs more often during the springtime. Low water occurs really during the heat of the summer, during less water, rains and such in August typically. And as you can see, well, why would that matter? If the level of the river is too high, the ship can't get under the bridges. And so how do river cruise lines address this? If they cannot go under a bridge, they will stop and either bus you out to the different excursion stops, and this can happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but I want you to be aware of it. Or a great thing with Viking is their ability to move you from one of their ships to another. So they could have a southbound cruise leaving out of Amsterdam, come down the Rhine, meet a bridge that they can't go under. A northbound cruise on Viking, same type of ship, almost down to the stateroom being exactly the same. They meet at a bridge. They send you out on your shore excursion that day, and the staff of the ship moves all of the belongings of every passenger to the opposite ship, same stateroom. You'll walk in, you won't even know the difference of what ship you're on, and you'll carry on your cruise. And you won't have those extended bus days that you might have on a different cruise line that just doesn't have the capacity on the ship. Viking's consistency of their fleet really helps during the high water and low water levels. Same thing happens in low water. The drafts of these river vessels are very shallow, so they can really travel in pretty low water. But as you can imagine, in a river versus an ocean, the levels in the water in the river is dealing in inches. Ocean, they deal in feet, big feet. They don't say, oh, the swells today were 36 inches. They talk about it in levels of feet. On the river, it's inches. And so they can travel on low waters, but not all the time. So beware of that. And please know this, some areas of a river could be impacted while others are not because of locks and different parts of the country. Some cruise lines, just so you know, they may know that this cruise experience is going to be so negatively impacted that it's not the same. They may tell you before your cruise that they've canceled the cruise based on low water. That doesn't happen every year. It doesn't happen even all the time, but it could happen. So I want you to be aware of that. But other cruise lines, they have different abilities, or they forecast some rains. And like I said, dealing in inches, not in feet. So the level of the water could rise to a point where they could still sail, even if it looks like it's too low a week or two before your cruise. All balconies are not equal, and you may not need a balcony. Just beware on the river that understand the difference between a French balcony, a full balcony, and just a window that can drop. And I'll show you one of those experiences where really your space is almost indoor, outdoor, but understand you are off the ship more than you are on. So your balcony may not mean as much to you as it would on an ocean cruise. But in this case, if a balcony matters to you, you have to beware. At many ports of call on the river, there's not dock space for cruises ships to park right next to land. They will stack them up right next to each other because the port is only able to service one entry for the cruise passengers. So if you are not in the first position, you may be in the third position. Please know your balcony window could be opened right next door to somebody else's balcony on another ship. Just be aware of that. While you're sailing, a balcony is a fabulous experience, but please understand, I don't want that to be a surprise to you on the first morning of your river cruise and you in your robe open up the curtains and are looking for a beautiful view and there's a river ship right next to you. That does happen. So please be aware of that as you think through your river cruise experience. Moving on to our next really FYI is continuing to understand what this slide means. Sold out. And I really mean sold out this year because the rivers of Europe were so negatively impacted due to the coronavirus. Many of our clients and the cruise lines passengers were unable to sail this year and have already booked for next year. So next year is filling up like crazy. This is not a sales pitch, please. I just want to manage your expectations so that you know if you want to sail on a river cruise next year, get your deposit in now. And we're going to talk about some exclusive promotions here in a minute. So I don't want to belabor the point, but that is important to you. Let's go through some cruise lines. Let's talk specifics here. AMA Waterways. What is AMA all about? They're really modern and contemporary in their design. I would call it stylish yet personable. Their feeling on ship, what the design, the decor, the experience that the crew tries to provide is a personal experience with a little style to it. From a price point, it's probably right in the middle of the preferred partners that I'm going to share with you today. They've got 24 ships in their fleet, again, not just all in Europe. They've got it in Africa. They've got a couple on the Mekong as well. Their crown jewel recently was the Ama Magna, but also another beautiful ship that's come out this year that's on the Rhine is the Ama Siena. But the Ama Magna is one I want to talk about here real quick. This is a picture from the Ama Magna. If you remember, I mentioned to you most river cruises are 443 feet long and 38.5 feet wide. The Ama Magna is what I like to call a double wide. Almost not fair to use a trailer analogy, a mobile home analogy to a river vessel, but the Ama Magna is 72 feet wide, and they didn't pack it with that many more guests. It's still around 140 guests on the Ama Magna, so you get a much bigger feeling of an experience in your public spaces and your staterooms than you would on a typical river vessel. So if that's of interest to you, look up the Ama Magna. The Ama Magna only sails on the Danube. It's too wide to traverse the main Danube Canal to get up to, the Main, to get up to the Main and the Rhine. So please be aware of that. That's where it is, and currently if you're interested. Crystal, we definitely mentioned Crystal in a couple of our highlights of the differences and what might be really special about Crystal. It truly is an all-inclusive experience. Their 4 ships are the youngest in all of the river cruise fleet that's out there. They don't have a ship, I believe, that is older than 4 years old at this point. So, and their 4 ships are all the same. Different names, slightly different decor, but layouts are very much the same. And so if you love service, this is going to be probably your best passenger to crew ratio experience. This is your a la minute cuisine experience. This is the cruise line that has butlers. I'm not kidding. Butlers in every stateroom that know all of your needs, whims, asks, necessities. They're there for you 24/7. They are not serving wine for dinner. They're not unloading the bikes for the afternoon excursion. Your butler is your butler. Those 4 ships provide what I would call a truly luxury experience on the river. Tauk is another cruise line I have sailed on. I definitely recommend. And as I think about the highlights, what's the essence of Tauk? This is another cruise line that is truly as close as you can get to all-inclusive. It's more of an escorted vacation because of their land experience. For over 90 years, Tauk has been operating land vacations. They branched out into the river experience and took the best of the land experience, that escorted vacation, the educational opportunity, the behind the scenes, easy exclusive access that's easy for Tauk, not easy for others to get into. That's the experience you're going to have on Tauk. I think you will find that their ships are beautifully appointed. Not a luxury, but definitely not a 3-star experience. It's still in the 4- and 5-star category, where Crystal may be closer to a 6-star experience on the river. I mentioned that they have a program called Tauk Bridges that's probably the best in class in the river for your multi-generational children's programming. I do not want to miss the opportunity to let you know Ama Waterways also has a very good children's program, as they have partnered with Disney. And they have a few departures a year that are dedicated just for the multi-generational trip. So, and it's not Mickey Mouse in your face. It's really the Disney experience on a river vessel without Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck running all over the river vessel. So think of Ama for your children's experience, but Tauk Bridges, there's nothing like it. Uniworld. As I think of Uniworld, you can see a slightly different look and feel to Uniworld. Still an all-inclusive experience, but it's really an old world design. These ships are really one of a kind. Every ship is designed to be uniquely set in the destination. So a ship that's on the Seine that sails out of Paris is going to have a French Parisian feel, much different than a German experience that you would have by sailing on the Rhine. If you look at the river cruise experience and your travels where you like boutique hotels, you like unique places like a Red Carnation Hotel versus a JW Marriott or a Ritz-Carlton that has similar feel, Uniworld is your choice. It's really a Victorian experience that's set in the destination, and it's super, super unique. And they really focus on that hotel experience on the river. One of the most widely known cruise lines that's out there is Viking, and they are fantastic. I don't want to disparage them by any means because they're last. If you noticed, it was alphabetical. So Viking came last in the alphabet. They have a fantastic consistency of fleet. So from one ship to the next, one river to the next, you can understand and expect that your service levels, your design, everything will be delivered synchronously in all of the different stops. It's a Scandinavian design. The owner of Viking Cruises Tour is a Norwegian. So most of his design, his experiences, how he looks at travel on the rivers, and obviously you probably know they have ocean cruises as well, is very sleek design, very simple of concept, and their focus is clearly the destination. Not as many frills and rills on a Viking river ship. Really, when you start talking about expansive fitness centers and spa facilities and multiple food venues, they want to deliver you to the town or the city so that you can experience it off ship more so than on. You can see they dominate in regards to the beds on the water. 61 ships for Vikings. So as I mentioned, high water, low water, their ability to help you in those situations and move you from ship to ship, they can deliver on that promise because of their consistency. And from a value proposition, they would be your best value, but they're also not as all-inclusive as some of the others. So that may or may not matter to you as you think through these different cruise lines. To somewhat wrap it up here as we're getting to the top of the hour, I don't want to belabor the point. Also want to get to, if there's any questions, we'll get to those in just a second. Some of our promotions, just for watching today. Call one of our travel advisors, and each of the 5 river cruise partners that I've talked about, there are fantastic opportunities for literal savings. You can save money on the cruise fare. Maybe you're looking for an upgrade from one category to the next, complimentary. AMA Waterways has that. Oh, Tauk. If I've never sailed on Tauk before, I get a free pre-night hotel. Maybe I could use that on my stop in Vienna, and I want to go in a couple days early, and I'll spend one night myself on my dollar, and 2 nights. The second night, Tauk's going to pick that up for you on your first river cruise experience. Talk to us. Some of these offers are available for the rest of the month. Some of these offers have a 2-week booking opportunity for you. Some have shipboard credit. Viking also has a beverage package that is complimentary on select sailings. So as I mentioned, that non-inclusive feel of the alcohol that Viking has, we have an opportunity today on select sailings if you want to book that could get you that complimentary beverage package, so you do have an all-inclusive experience on Viking from a beverage side of things. So we have you covered on all of these different experiences. There is some type of savings or promotion that is available to you, but what I want to encourage you to know is river cruising is special. It's unique. If you've never done it, you need to do it. If you love land vacations, but you want to experience a cruise, this is your best bet. If you love ocean cruises, but you kind of been there, done that, you want maybe a little smaller, a little bit of a different pace, you don't like the Cirque du Soleil act in one big theater and 6,000 people at the pool fighting for a deck chair, that's not your vacation experience. I would encourage you to think about a river cruise as your next option. I really want to thank you for joining us today. I went fast, I went furious. We had a lot of things to talk about. I'm going to jump in our Q&A and see if I can jump on here. I think Peggy, we mentioned Vietnam, the Mekong River. I talked about AMA, but also Viking and Uniworld have some great experiences there as well, and they will take great care of you. So if that cruise line, which one of those fits your needs, definitely the river of the Mekong would be exciting to you. Somebody asked here about what's the difference between a French balcony and a full balcony. French balcony is open the door, but there's really no space to walk out. It's a partial balcony versus a full balcony where you may have 2 to 3 feet. Again, you're not going to have the big expanse of an ocean cruise balcony. And I showed you some of those pictures of the balcony. The balcony I showed you where they were able to step out, that's a full balcony. I didn't show a picture of a French balcony, but I might actually be able to show you. I'll go back to it. So pardon me for the fast clicking here, but let's go back. and I can show you the Crystal picture. The Crystal picture will give you an idea of how Crystal likes to do it. If you see, the top portion of that window comes all the way down to the railing. And so this would be it's not really a balcony experience, but you have the open air experience of a balcony, but you don't sacrifice square footage of your cabin. Think about it that way too. 38.5 feet wide for the majority of the river vessels. If you have a balcony, it's typically going to eat into the square footage of your stateroom. On Crystal, they maximize the stateroom square footage and still give you the opportunity to have that experience of a balcony feel with the open air window ability. So that's kind of the balcony discussion. Let's continue talking about here. Do we recommend that you get there early? Oh my goodness, if you don't get there early or stay late, I would absolutely encourage you to do that. You think about it. On the Seine, why would you not want to stay an extra night in Paris? Some of the cruise lines build that into the itinerary, an overland stay as a part of the original itinerary. All of them offer extensions. We also could pick a special, unique hotel that fits your needs even better than maybe what the cruise line would. But there's transfers that they can help you with to get you from the airport to your hotel for that pre-night and then to the river cruise or after your cruise is over, instead of rushing to the airport first thing in the morning to catch your flight back to North America. We would recommend getting off in one of those great stops and enjoying Amsterdam or Basel if you're on the Rhine, instead of heading right to the airport and not getting that extra night stay. Good question on mobility. It is something to think through. Many, if not all, of the river cruise lines have elevators. Again, think about this. There's not a lot of decks on a river vessel. Typically, you're going to have 2 decks on most river cruises that you're primarily going to access for your stateroom or your meal service in the restaurants. Then you'll have a top deck. So it's really 3 decks, if you think of it that way, that allows you to roam the top and sit under a cabana, sit at a bar. There's rooftop bars on many of these cruise lines that allow you to have that full 360-degree view of the valleys that you're sailing through, to see that castle off in the distance. So that's something to think about from a mobility standpoint of traversing with an elevator on the ship. But I do want to caution you, in some of the ports of call, like I mentioned, you may be stacked up next to a different vessel. And if you are the 5th vessel, to get off of your ship, you may have to go up to the top, walk across, get on the elevator, go down, go up. And so it could take a little bit longer to traverse. I would say if you are wheelchair bound, you need to talk to our advisor about which river and which river cruise line to go on, because there will be definitely more challenges, because I can say ADA is not necessarily a thing on the river in Europe. So be leery of that. But if you have the ability to move around a little bit with the help of an elevator on something like a staircase, I think you can definitely travel on the river and not be worried about that. Somebody was mentioning just kind of about restrictions, the travel in a post-pandemic world. What is that going to look like? If I were traveling and had my very first trip of choice, I can tell you I would think about a river cruise first. And that's because smaller passenger numbers, easier access to medical facilities, no days at sea. You're not in a ship that could be, moving from one place to the next and not be touching land for a 24-hour period. I think the river cruises think of themselves more as an escorted vacation. So there's, I think, a little bit more care there. But the medical facilities on board are not going to be what you would see on an ocean vessel. They're not going to have full service doctors and infirmaries that have the state-of-the-art technology or medicine that's available to you. Why? Because they're so close to land. So then you have the option and opportunities of medical clinics and hospitals on land that you can get to. So don't think of it as I'm sacrificing medical care on the river. It's just going to be delivered to you in a little bit of a different way. There would be somebody that is medically trained on board to answer that question about a physician. I can't speak to specifically that there is going to be an MD on every ship, again, because of their access to hospitals and medical care and clinics on land. So please know that it can be mitigated in that way. It's just going to be done differently than on an ocean vessel, where if you're at a day at sea, you definitely want to know that there's adequate medical care available to you. I'm not sure how cruises are going to handle testing pre-embarkation as you get on. I anticipate, as we would all want and expect, some level of social distancing, limiting capacity even on the first few sailings. So even a vessel that has 140 passengers on Amma or 194 on Viking, not a lot, but the ship's smaller. So I could see them saying, we're only going to sail at 50% capacity so that we allow for restaurant seating to be socially distanced or physically distanced rather than socially, because you can still talk, but you just are separated by the adequate space. There could be face coverings that could be required. I'm not sure how that's going to go. There are cruises that are going on in Europe right now that are taking European passengers that have countries that share similar statistical data in regards to their health standards. The borders are open in some cases to shared borders between countries. So they're learning a lot. These cruise lines, Amma Waterways already has a number of itineraries that are sailing right now. So they're learning a lot about how to sail safer and better for all of us that will be traveling hopefully next summer on a river cruise. Tauk Bridges offers their program. They have a land portion of their bridges and a river cruise. So they're on the Rhine, the Danube, and the Seine, as well as the Rhone. So they have those 4 river covers. I don't believe they have the Douro for bridges or the Mekong or any of the exotics, but they do have the primary 4 that I mentioned with the Rhine, the Danube, the Rhone, and the Seine. And then children's and multi-gen programs on US based river cruising. There really isn't one that has a spectacular program. I think kids could go, but are the experiences geared towards these level of traveler? I would say they're not. But kids could still enjoy it. It all depends on the parents and the grandparents and how they view this experience. But they definitely, the Amma Waterways and the Tauk Bridges programs would be ones in Europe that I would highly recommend. Again, the food is geared towards 8 to 18-year-olds, and they have food geared towards adults. So that's really neat. So I did mention a lot during this presentation, this comparison sheet. So if you open up your chat box right now, you still should be able to find the link there to our comparison sheet that's a PDF. If you can't get that to work, please do not worry. On Friday, we have all of your email addresses because you signed up for this program. We will email you a PDF that you can print off on Friday. So please know we'll get that to you. If for some by chance it doesn't get to your inbox, it gets caught up in your spam filter, call Bon Voyage Travel. Call your advisor. They have access to this river cruise comparison. They can actually speak even greater detail about all the differences of the river cruise lines and the rivers. So speak to an advisor. If you don't have one, pick up the phone, 520-797-1110. Call us. We're ready. Go to our website. Click on advisors and you can see which one of our advisors are experienced on the river and you may want to talk to if you don't have an advisor with us now. But I'm going to kind of wrap it up as we are past the top of the hour. I want to thank you for staying on. Thank you for joining us. Please head back to our website, bvtravel.com, and you can click on events on our main page, and you will see all the different opportunities to engage with us with our webinar series. We're scheduling those out into October. Right now, we only have September up. And so please join us next week, Celebrity Cruises, Travel Weekly's best premium cruise line, voted by the Travel Weekly editors and authors. So you're going to want to jump in with us next Wednesday if you want to hear about Celebrity Cruises. So see you soon. Travel safe, be safe, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.